Let me say this before anyone judges me. I wasn't actively doing anything wrong when it happened. I wasn't cheating. I wasn't messaging some guy behind my husband's back. I wasn't sneaking around in hotel rooms or lying about girls' trips. I was sitting on our couch in sweatpants, eating chocolate out of the wrapper, half watching a show, while my husband very kindly offered to fix my phone because I kept complaining it was acting weird. That's it. That's the scene. No candlelight, no mystery number, no lipstick on a shirt. Just my husband on the other end of the couch saying, "Give it to me, I'll sort it out," while I handed him my entire digital life without thinking twice. And 5 minutes later, he was standing in the doorway of our bedroom, holding my phone, staring at me like I had just ripped out the floor from under our marriage. All because of something I honestly, genuinely, stupidly forgot existed. An old hidden album labeled Love of My Life, with the wrong person inside it. We need to rewind before I start sounding like a complete monster, because I know how it looks from the outside. Married woman keeps a secret shrine to her ex on her phone, husband finds it, walks out. What did she expect? But nothing in my head felt that simple. So let me go back. Before I ever met my husband, there was Liam. Yes, I know. Even his name sounds like the past you romanticize. Liam was the kind of relationship you swear is once in a lifetime when you're in it, and maybe it is, just not in the way you think. We met at 22. We were mess and magic from day one. Everything felt intense. We wrote long messages at 3 a.m. We stayed up talking until the sun came up and then dragged ourselves to work like zombies. We had fights that could have powered an entire city, then made up like nothing else existed. He said things like, "You're the person I waited my whole life to meet." And I believed him, because I wanted to believe someone could feel that way about me and mean it. And I can admit this now. I felt more alive in that chaos than I had in years. Every moment felt like a scene. Every text felt like a chapter. Every photo felt like proof that the story was real. So yes, I saved everything. I screenshotted our messages. I screen-recorded our video calls. I took photos of handwritten notes and ticket stubs and bracelets he gave me. I saved his voice notes where he'd talk about nothing for 4 minutes, and somehow it still felt like everything. I created an album on my phone and named it like a dramatic 22-year-old in love. Love of my life. At the time, it didn't feel exaggerated. It felt accurate. Of course, he was the love of my life. Who else could it be if not the person who made my heart race and my stomach flip and my world revolve around whether he replied in 5 minutes or 30? Keeping that album felt important, like a record, like a backup, like a guarantee that even if everything crashed and burned, I'd still have proof that once someone adored me like that. And then, surprise, everything crashed and burned. Not suddenly, slowly. The late replies multiplied. The busy explanations got vaguer. The argument started circling the same topics: priorities, effort, future plans that never moved beyond talk. He started slipping away by inches. Less time, less attention, less everything. Until one day, he wasn't busy anymore. He was just gone. We ended with a short conversation that did not fit the epic script I had in my head. "I just don't see this working long term," he said, like we were a project, not a relationship. "I thought you said I was the person you waited your whole life for," I replied. "You were," he said, "for who I was then." That sentence lodged itself in my ribcage and lived there for years. We didn't have a dramatic last kiss in the rain. We didn't have a grand goodbye speech. We had silence. And after the silence, I had that album, Love of My Life, full of a man who chose to move on. Friends told me to delete it. "Wipe it," my best friend said. "Torch the whole thing. It's holding you back." I said I would. I absolutely intended to. I even opened the album one night, thumb hovering over the delete button. I scrolled through the photos. Us in a park, us at a concert, him holding my hand across a table, me in his hoodie taking a mirror selfie. I watched a few of the videos. Him laughing so hard he could barely breathe, me tripping over nothing, and then laughing with him, our faces close together in bad lighting, saying, "We're always going to be like this." Like we were making a promise the universe was required to honor. I listened to one of the saved voice notes, his voice sleepy and low. "You'll never love anyone the way you love me. You know that, right?" My chest hurt, but not in the still in love way. It hurt in the, I can't believe how sure I was about something that turned out to be temporary way. I closed the album. I told myself I'd delete it later. Later became never. Instead, I did what most people do with things they aren't ready to let go of, but know they shouldn't keep out in the open. I buried it, moved it into a hidden folder, put a password on it, shoved it into the digital attic of my phone. Out of sight, out of conversation, not out of existence. Then life moved, like it does. Years went by. New jobs, new friends, new problems, and eventually, a new man. My husband's name is Ethan. He is nothing like Liam. If Liam was fireworks, Ethan is steady daylight. They're both bright, but in completely different ways. Where Liam was unpredictable, Ethan is consistent. Where Liam made promises he couldn't keep, Ethan doesn't say anything he's not prepared to back up with action. Where Liam made me feel like I was in a film, Ethan makes me feel like I'm in an actual life. When I met Ethan, I didn't have that instant, "This is it, this is the one" lightning strike. What I had was something quieter. I liked talking to him. I liked how he listened when I did. I liked that he showed up when he said he would. I liked that he remembered small details without making a big show of it. Our first dates weren't explosive, they were comfortable. Which, honestly, bored me at first. I mistook calm for lack of depth. It took me a while to realize that depth doesn't always feel like chaos. Sometimes it feels like a hand you can actually hold on to without worrying it will let go when things get boring or difficult. Ethan and I built something steady. We stacked routines and traditions and inside jokes. We planned ahead instead of just spinning in the moment. We had arguments, sure, but they didn't end with one of us storming out and disappearing for hours just to prove some point about space. He proposed 3 years in. It wasn't dramatic. No fireworks, no crowd, no choreographed anything. We were in our kitchen. He'd made dinner. We were both in socks. He pulled a ring from his pocket while I stood there holding a wooden spoon and a tea towel. "I want to do this with you," he said simply. "All of it. The boring and the good and the hard. Will you marry me?" No grand speeches, no rehearsed lines. Just that. I said yes, not because my stomach flipped the way it did with Liam, not because my heart felt like it was sprinting, but because for once, my heart felt like it could rest. Did I still think about Liam? Sometimes, in small, embarrassing ways. When a song came on that reminded me of us. When I passed a street we'd once walked down together. When someone mentioned him in passing, and I had to pretend my chest didn't tighten for half a second. Did I open the album? Very rarely. Maybe once every few months at first. Then once a year. Then not at all. I told myself the album didn't matter anymore. It was just there. Old files, old moments, old versions of me. When Ethan and I moved in together, then got married, I changed phones twice. Each time I transferred my data, that album went with it, invisible, hidden, unmentioned. It became part of the furniture of my digital life, like a box in the back of a closet you never open but also never throw out. Did I ever think about changing the title? Love of my life. Honestly? No. It stopped being words I actively read and became more like a label on a file cabinet I never pulled open. If you'd asked me what albums I had on my phone, I could have listed family, travel, work, Screenshots, random. Love of my life wouldn't even have crossed my mind. But forgetting something exists doesn't mean it stops being true. The night everything came crashing down was a Tuesday. Not a dramatic weekend, not an anniversary, not one of those things were already tense days. We'd had a normal work day. I'd come home slightly irritated about my boss. He'd come home slightly exhausted from meetings. We ate leftovers. We watched a show. We both scrolled on our phones. At some point, I sighed and said, "My phone keeps freezing. I swear this update made it worse." Ethan glanced over. "Give it here," he said. "I'll check your storage. You probably have 1,000 videos you never deleted." He wasn't wrong. I'm a digital hoarder. I rolled my eyes and handed him the phone. "Just don't delete anything important," I said jokingly. He smiled. "You mean the 3,912 screenshots of recipes you never cooked?" "Those are for inspiration," I protested. He shook his head and started clicking through settings. "Seriously, that's all it was. No suspicion, no spying, no, 'Give me your password, I want to see who you're talking to.' Just a husband doing tech support on the couch." I went back to half watching the show, half scrolling through my laptop, comfortable in the assumption that there was nothing on my phone he didn't already know about. That assumption lasted about 4 minutes. "Wow," he muttered, 28 gigabytes of photos and videos. "Memories," I called back. "Don't bully my memories." He was quiet for a bit, then he said, "Huh?" Not just a huh. A curious, soft huh that made something in my chest twist. I looked over. His eyebrows were slightly pulled together. His thumb was hovering over the screen instead of moving. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. "What?" I repeated, a little sharper. He glanced up at me, then back down. "How long have you had this folder?" he asked. "What folder?" I frowned. He turned the phone so I could see the screen. My stomach turned to ice. There it was, plain as day, inside the Photos app, in the hidden section, where he'd gone to see if I had too many secret screenshots. Album title, Love of My Life. My brain did that thing where it tries to explain something before reality has fully hit. "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual while my heart sprinted. "That's old. I don't even remember what's in there." The second the words left my mouth, I knew how that sounded. If it was nothing, why was it hidden? If it was nothing, why was I suddenly sweating? His thumb pressed on the album. I swear time slowed. I watched his face more than the screen. At first, he looked confused, then focused, then still. So still. His jaw shifted once. His eyes didn't blink. I leaned over, panic starting to rise, and saw what he was looking at. Not us. Not wedding photos. Not our honeymoon. Him. Liam. Smiling in that easy, familiar way I could recognize even from a thumbnail. The cover image was one I'd chosen years ago without thinking about how it would look to someone else. Liam laughing with his head tilted back, my shoulder visible at the edge of the frame, his hand reaching toward me. Below that, the grid. Dozens and dozens of photos, selfies of us pressed together in mirrors. Him kissing my cheek, me wrapped in his hoodie, our hands intertwined with that silly caption I'd once written on a screenshot. "Where I belong." And then the screenshots, chats where I'd written things like, "You're my soulmate. I will never feel this way about anyone else. You're the love of my life, you know that." There were photos of handwritten notes where I'd written his name with hearts, like a teenager, and then taken pictures of them so I could keep them forever. There were videos, short, shaky ones of us laughing. One longer one where he was lying on a pillow, looking at the camera saying, "You'll never love anyone the way you love me. You'll try, but you won't, and that's okay, because I'll always be the person who changed your life." I'd saved that one separately because back then, I thought it was romantic. Now, watching Ethan watch it was like getting punched in the chest. "I can explain," I blurted out. Those words should come with a warning label, because they almost always mean, I'm about to minimize something that looks exactly as bad as you think. Ethan finally blinked. He didn't shout. He didn't throw the phone. He just looked up, straight at me, and said quietly, "How long have you had this?" "I told you it's old," I said. "From before you. Before everything. I just never got around to deleting it." He looked back at the screen. "You put it in a hidden folder," he said. "That's just because I didn't want to see it all the time," I argued. "It was closure, nostalgia. It doesn't mean anything now." My voice sounded flimsy even to me. He scrolled slowly. My cheeks burned. There I was, in a picture of a handwritten letter I'd sent to Liam, the text visible in the image. "You are the love of my life. No matter what happens, no one will ever compare to you." Ethan tapped to enlarge it. "I forgot that was even in there," I said quickly. "I don't think that way anymore. People change, feelings change. You know that." He nodded once, but it wasn't agreement. It was the kind of nod you give when you've just realized something and you're accepting it. He swiped again. Another screenshot where I'd written, "I know I'll have to move on one day, but I don't want to. I feel like loving anyone after you will just be pretending." I could practically hear my younger self screaming in excitement when I saved that. Now, those words were a knife pointed at my current life. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then he locked the phone, placed it on the coffee table, and looked at me. "I was never love of your life, was I?" he asked. The question landed heavier than if he'd yelled. "Yes, you are," I insisted. "You are now. That was then. I was young, dramatic. I thought that relationship was everything. I didn't know what real love was yet." "But you kept it," he said. "All of it. You kept him in a protected folder with that title." "I told you, I just forgot it was there," I said. "It's like an old journal. You don't burn every page of your past just because you've moved on." I was reaching. I knew it. He shook his head slightly. "This isn't a random journal," he said. "This is a hidden shrine." The word hit harder than I wanted it to. Shrine. "That's not fair," I snapped. "It's not like I look at it every day. I haven't opened it in months, maybe years. It's just old data." "Then why is his picture still pinned as the cover?" he asked. "Why is the album still called that?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because I had no good answer. The truth was simple and ugly. Because deep down, some part of me liked knowing that those words still existed somewhere with his face attached to them. Even if my feelings had changed, even if my life had moved on, even if I loved Ethan in a completely different, deeper way, there was still a part of me, buried under years and experiences, that clung to the idea that once upon a time I had felt something so intense I called it love of my life and meant it. I thought keeping that proof was harmless. I didn't think about what it meant to the man who believed that title belonged to him now. "Ethan," I said, softening my tone, "please. This is being blown out of proportion. Everyone has a past. Everyone has things they said and felt deeply at one point and then moved on from. The difference is just that mine is in pictures instead of in some box in an attic." "I know you have a past," he said. "I've never had a problem with that. I've never asked you to pretend it didn't exist. What I didn't know is that you kept it like this, carefully saved, hidden, titled like that." "It's just a title," I protested. "Words. It doesn't reflect how I feel now." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I suddenly became painfully aware of all the times I'd called him my person, my home, my partner, but never love of my life. He'd called me that once. It had been after a long week when we'd both been stressed and snappy, but then ended up sitting on the floor of our bedroom, laughing over something small and stupid. He'd kissed my forehead and said, "You are the love of my life, you know that?" I remember pausing for a fraction of a second, not because I didn't feel deep love for him, but because the phrase itself still tasted like Liam's voice in that old video. I'd switched it. "I love you more than anything," I'd said instead. He hadn't pushed. I'd never noticed how much that choice mattered until he stood there now, phone between us like evidence. "You didn't forget this album existed," he said quietly. "You forgot I might find it." That sentence sliced straight through my defenses. "I'm allowed to have memories," I insisted, hearing my voice rise. "I am allowed to have had a life before you. I am allowed to have loved someone, been hurt, processed it in my own way. Keeping photos doesn't mean I want him back. It doesn't mean I don't love you." "I never said you wanted him back," Ethan replied. "What I'm telling you is that I will not spend my life competing with a ghost you keep polished." "It's not like that," I pleaded. "It is like that for me," he said, "because I just watched a younger you write to another man. No one will ever compare to you. You'll always be the love of my life." And then I looked around at my life, this apartment, our marriage, and realized you never said that to me. Not once. You had that album title saved for someone else and didn't bother to change it. "It was laziness," I said, "not some deliberate statement. I'm not sitting around comparing you two every day." "Maybe not every day," he said, "but often enough that you kept all this locked away instead of letting it go." His calm was worse than any yelling he could have done. If he'd shouted, I could have matched his volume, fought, pushed back. This quiet hurt left nowhere to hide. He picked up his keys from the side table. "What are you doing?" I asked, panic climbing. "I need to leave," he said. "I can't even look at you right now without hearing you tell someone else they were the love of your life while you kept me in the safe, stable option category." "That's not true," I said quickly. "You're twisting this into something it's not. I love you. I chose you." He slipped on his shoes. "You chose a future with me," he corrected, "which I valued. I thought we were building something we both saw as special. I didn't realize you saw me as the practical choice and someone else as the epic one." "That is not what I said," I fired back. "You're projecting so much onto a stupid old folder." He opened the door. "You named it," he said without turning around. "Not me." Then he walked out. No dramatic slam, no final speech, just the door closing and his footsteps fading down the hall. I told myself he just needed air. He'd gone to clear his head before. Usually he'd walk around the block, maybe drive for a while, cool off, and then come back willing to talk. So I sat there on the couch, staring at my phone, terrified to open the album again, but doing it anyway. It was like my brain wanted to see the crime scene I'd created. I scrolled through the pictures with fresh eyes. They didn't look romantic anymore. They looked obsessive. Every angle of his face, every silly moment, every tiny scrap of proof that once I'd been adored by someone in a way I thought was unique. I watched that old video again, Liam saying I'd never love anyone the way I loved him. And for the first time, I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt trapped. Because part of me had believed him, and part of me had lived my entire relationship with Ethan in silent comparison to that statement, trying to prove it wrong while still secretly clinging to its drama. I hadn't realized how much power I'd given to one careless claim from a man who'd left. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I held down the album and hovered over delete. My thumb didn't move. What if Ethan came back and asked to see that I'd deleted it? If it was gone, it would look like I only did it because he got caught. If I left it, it would make me look like I didn't care. I was trapped in the same place I'd been in for years, unable to fully let go, unable to fully own it. The door didn't open that night. I fell asleep on the couch with my phone in my hand, convincing myself he'd come home after I drifted off and be next to me in the morning. He wasn't. The next day, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not just the usual quiet of our apartment when one of us left early. A heavy, hollow quiet. His side of the bed was untouched. No dent in the pillow. No faint warmth. My stomach clenched. I walked to the closet. Half of it was empty. His shirts gone. His suits gone. His worn-out hoodie he always threw on in the evenings gone. The shelf where he kept his watch box and cologne was stripped. I moved to the bathroom. His toothbrush holder was empty. The space where his razor used to sit looked suddenly too bare. Back in the living room, I saw it. A folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. For a second, I seriously considered not opening it. Like if I didn't read the words, they couldn't be true. But of course I opened it. In his handwriting, "I won't compete with your past. Go be with it." One sentence. No love, no name, no sign-off. My knees actually gave out. I had always thought that expression was exaggerated until my body did it, like someone had turned off a switch. I slid down the cabinet and sat on the kitchen floor, clutching that note, trying to convince myself this was a dramatic move he'd undo in a day. People cool off, people calm down, people overreact and then realize they went too far. We're married, I thought. Married people don't just move out overnight, except sometimes they do, especially when the thing that broke them wasn't a sudden shock, but the realization that they'd been living with a truth you hadn't shared. I called him, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Please come home so we can talk. I'm so sorry. I'll delete it. It doesn't mean what you think. I love you." No reply. I texted again, nothing. I called his sister. "Have you talked to Ethan?" I asked. There was a pause. "Yeah," she said slowly. "He's here." Relief flooded me. "Okay, good. Can you please put him on?" "No," she cut me off. "He doesn't want to talk to you." My throat tightened. "Can you at least tell him?" "He told me what he found," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "The album, the title, the screenshots. Why would you marry my brother if you were still holding on to someone else like that?" "I'm not still holding on," I insisted. "It was an old folder I forgot about. It's not like I've been looking at it every day." "You hid it," she said. "You labeled it like that. You kept it for years. How exactly does that look like forgetting?" I swallowed. "He knows I had a serious relationship before him," I said weakly. "It's not like I lied about that." "Knowing you had a past is one thing," she replied. "Seeing you talk to someone else like they were the only person you'd ever really love is another." "He's twisting it," I said. "Everyone says things like that when they're young." "But they don't save them in a protected vault," she shot back. "You didn't lose Ethan because you once loved someone. You lost him because you built a little museum for it, and then tried to pretend it wasn't there." My eyes stung. "Is he really done?" I whispered. She was quiet for a second, then said, "He says he is, and I support him. Don't call me again about this." Then she hung up, blocked me a few hours later. It got worse. I didn't think it could, but it did. Because in this era, nothing stays private for long. Not humiliation, not heartbreak, not even a badly titled album. That afternoon, my phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again, and again, and again. Instagram notifications, messages from friends, a missed call from my mother-in-law. I opened Instagram first. At the top of my feed, Ethan's story. A blurry screenshot of my Photos app. The hidden section. The album title barely visible, but readable if you knew what you were looking for. Love of my life. He'd blurred the thumbnail, but you could tell it was a man's face. The caption, "If your wife says you're the love of her life, check her phone." My heart stopped. I clicked through to the next slide. Text on a black background. "I won't fight a memory. I deserve better than being a placeholder in someone else's story." I felt like I'd been slapped. My first instinct was rage. How could he do this? How could he drag our private mess into public like that? How could he invite strangers into something so intimate? Then the messages started. Some were from people I barely knew. "What happened? Is that about you?" Some were from friends. "Is this really what it looks like?" "Please tell me this is a misunderstanding." Then my mother-in-law called, her voice already shaking. "What did you do?" she asked. "He's here, he's devastated, and now I see this. Why would you hurt him like that?" I tried to explain. Tried to say it wasn't as ongoing as it looked, that it was old, that I'd moved on. She cried. I welcomed you into this family, she said. I believed you when you said you loved my son. I never imagined you would keep holding another man above him like some kind of hidden standard. I didn't. I tried. She cut me off. Please don't call me for a while, she said. We need space from this. Click. Then his friends started unfollowing me. One even messaged, You humiliated him. I hope you're proud of yourself. I wanted to scream at all of them. This is not the full story. I didn't cheat. I didn't run back to my ex. I just kept some photos, some messages, some pieces of a past version of myself. But the more I tried to say that out loud, the more hollow it sounded. Because it wasn't just photos. It was the title. It was the volume. It was the way I'd tucked it away like a treasure instead of letting it fade. And especially, it was what that title said to the man who thought he held that place in my life now. For 3 days, I lived in a sort of suspended state. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus, couldn't sleep properly. I refreshed Ethan's chat like a habit, even though I knew I was blocked. The little message never changed from message not delivered. On the 3rd day, an unknown number texted me. No name, no profile picture. Just, you didn't lose me to your ex. You lost me to your lies. I knew immediately it was him. Before I could reply, another message came. Don't contact me again. That was it. No opening for discussion. No hint of maybe. Door closed. People love to say you don't fall out of love overnight. Maybe that's true. But you can fall out of belief overnight. Belief in what someone told you. Belief in the story you thought you were part of. Belief that you were the only one who truly held that place in their heart. Ethan didn't leave because he stopped loving me in an instant. He left because in an instant, he saw a version of me he didn't know how to live with. The version of me that froze her past in glass and labeled it love of my life, then invited someone else into a future built on top of it. I want to say he overreacted. Part of me still believes he did. Part of me feels like screaming. It was just a folder. People keep photo boxes from old relationships all the time. People reread their teenage diary entries. People keep their old letters in shoeboxes. But the difference is, people don't usually name those boxes something like love of my life, and then marry someone else while pretending that label doesn't mean anything anymore. I had options. I could have deleted it years ago. I could have changed the title. I could have told him, hey, I still have some old stuff I should probably clear out. I did none of those things. I chose silence and convenience. And silence is still a choice. I'm not writing this from some wise, enlightened place where I'm completely over it and able to laugh at my past. I'm writing this sitting in my living room, on the same couch where this started, with less furniture because he took his things, and an empty space on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. I deleted the album. Yes, I finally did. You can roll your eyes and say, too late, and you'd be right. I held it down, tapped delete album, confirmed it, watched it vanish as if those files never existed. I sat there afterward, phone in my hand, half expecting to feel lighter. I didn't, because deleting the record doesn't erase who I was when I made it, or the fact that I tried to drag that version of myself secretly into a new life. The album is gone. The damage it did isn't. People have asked me, the few who still talk to me, do you still think that X was the love of your life? It's a tricky question. Do I think he was the most intense emotion I'd ever felt at 22? Yes. Do I think what I felt then was automatically more valuable than the steady, consistent partnership I built later? No. Do I think love has to be measured in intensity to be real? I used to. I don't anymore. The problem is, I never updated the labels in my head or on my phone. to reflect that. So I was living a double truth. Out loud, I'd say, Ethan is my partner, my home, my person. Somewhere inside, I still had this dramatic little altar built to a past version of myself who believed in only one real love, and I never tore it down. Ethan didn't leave because I loved someone before him. He left because he realized I'd never fully let the idea of that love go, that I'd carved out a protected corner in my life for it, and then asked him to build a marriage next to it without ever acknowledging the shadow it cast. My therapist, yes, I added another story to the list she gets to unpack, asked me something that stuck. If Ethan had a hidden album on his phone, she said, labeled Love of My Life, full of a former partner's photos and messages where he wrote, "No one will ever compare to you," how would you feel? I didn't even have to think. Sick, I said. I'd feel sick. Why? She asked. Because it would feel like he still believed that, I replied. Because it would mean he kept her on some kind of pedestal and I was just the stable one. She looked at me. And yet, she said gently, you expect him to believe that you had somehow magically moved beyond what you very carefully preserved and titled. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it because I couldn't. I didn't want to delete proof that someone once loved me that much, I admitted finally. I spent years thinking I was disposable, forgettable. I liked having evidence that I'd mattered that deeply to someone. And you don't think your marriage was proof of that? She asked. I stared at my hands. I think I didn't trust that enough, I said quietly. I treated my past as more permanent than my present. That, in the end, is what this comes down to. I thought keeping that album was harmless nostalgia. I didn't realize it was an ongoing vote of confidence in the past over the present, every time I chose not to let it go. Do I think Ethan should have put that story on Instagram? I still go back and forth about that. It felt cruel. It felt exposing. It felt like he let other people into something I would have preferred to keep contained. But if I'm brutally honest, I already exposed him to something in a very different way. I exposed him to the fact that, deep down, some part of me had never updated the narrative about who held that love of my life place, even if my actions and choices said otherwise. He didn't publicly post my name. He blurred the thumbnail. He expressed his hurt in the only way he knew how in that moment, through a line that might warn other people not to ignore their intuition. If your wife says you're the love of her life, check her phone. Painful? Yes. Unfair? Maybe. But unfair is a word that cuts both ways. Was it fair that I let him propose, marry me, move in with me, build a life with me, without ever telling him I still kept a secret altar to the person I used to call that? Probably not. Here's the part people will argue with. I did love Ethan, truly, deeply, not with the fireworks and chaos of my early 20s, with something stronger. I loved his steadiness, his integrity, his dry sense of humor, the way he made coffee for me every morning without saying anything about it, the way he would listen, really listen, when I vented about something that seemed trivial from the outside. I loved the version of myself I was with him, more mature, more grounded, less volatile. But I failed to give that love the same pedestal I gave the one that had hurt me. I never named an album after him. I never wrote him some dramatic letter calling him love of my life. I just expected him to know he was that by default, because he was the one who stayed. He deserved more than default. He deserved a partner who wasn't still quietly holding on to the idea that her real, great love had already come and gone, and everything after was some kind of practical sequel. He deserved someone fully present, not someone who thought deep down, well, at least I still have that album to prove I was once someone's everything, while sharing a bed with him. Or, if you're waiting for the part where I say he forgave me and we slowly rebuilt trust, you're going to be disappointed. That's not this story. This story ends, at least for now, with separate apartments, separate lives, and me staring at way too much empty space in a closet. I don't have a neat bow for this. I have a lesson that tastes bitter. If you hold your past like a treasure and your present like something that could be replaced, eventually, your present will believe you. The title of that album sat there for years. Love of My Life. I stopped seeing it. He saw it once. And that was enough. I didn't lose my husband to my ex. Liam is off somewhere living whatever life he chose after deciding I wasn't part of it. I lost my husband to the truth I refused to confront, that I had kept a past version of myself and my feelings sealed in digital glass, untouched, unchallenged, and never honestly downgraded in my own mind. I wanted Ethan to believe he was the center of my story, but I never took the old title down from the shelf, so when he stumbled across it, he believed what it said, and he walked away. Not because he was weak, not because he didn't love me enough, but because he loved himself enough not to be a supporting character in a story I'd already written someone else's name across. All of this, the empty closet, the blocked number, the strained silence with his family, started with something as small as a label I never bothered to change. Love of My Life. 4 words, one forgotten title, and a truth I can't unwrite.